What up, homeboys? Today we are doing something a little different. I did a stream on Warmain Ice Crown, a Wrath of the Lich King server recently, and from that and the comments of the video that I afterwards made from it, I got a lot of the same questions in different iterations. Medina, how is Wrath of the Lich King Classic gonna do? Is Wrath of the Lich King a good game? Is Wrath of the Lich King gonna suck? Medina, I hope to marry you one day and to bring you to my bed and do unspeakable acts to you. Okay, we all know what you got to say all the time. So I bring you here from something that is not very known today, not very remembered today, sadly, but something that was said about Wrath of the Lich King in the ICC patch by nobody else but TotalBiscuit. For all you that don't know, TotalBiscuit used to be a huge World of Warcraft content creator before even YouTube was a big thing. He used to work on Warcraft Radio and a bunch of fan sites. He was a true gaming journalist, I would say, and he sadly passed away on 2018, and we could really use him right now. But this is from, if I am not mistaken, 2009, and this is just an archived version of that show, that radio show, that now we could call it a podcast. I don't think they called it a podcast back then, but that's basically, he used to host a podcast commenting on the game and the news as it was going. This is, it has the date right here. No, that's not the date. That's something else. That's episode 3, season, okay, and that's not the date. It's a shame. I would love to know the date, but this has to be around early 2009, more or less. Okay, and this is an archived version of his show from Wrath of the Lich King proper, back in 2009. And he already could see the problems with Wrath of the Lich King that would later go on to plague the other aspects of the game later on. But I just want to react to this little tidbit of his comments on it and see how well they aged, and to expose you to why I don't think Wrath of the Lich King is gonna be a great classic expansion.
From 3.2 and beyond, what other kinds of drastic changes from things like PvE to PvP, ready to BGs to Wintergrass would you like to see? Heroic Deadmines, things like that. No more, no. Heroic Deadmines is a terrible idea. Have another...
Okay, guys. He predicted Cataclysm would suck. Because, okay, this was in Wrath of the Lich King. Cataclysm actually released Heroic Deadmines. And if you remember Cataclysm times, the Heroic Deadmines was the equivalent of the Oculus. Every time you got Heroic Deadmines on your queue, you would quit and do another dungeon. Everybody hated it. I'm sure he said this comment out of nowhere, not actually predicting that, but I think it's really funny that just a few years later, just maybe a year after he said this, that would come true.
For instance, with pirates and ninjas in it, that's fine, but no Heroic Deadmines, good god. What are you thinking, man? Why would you want to go back in there? Yeah, I know it's a great instance, I know it's fun, but come on. Here's one from Chris. This is pretty interesting. Let's go with that, because this is a nice follow-up to what we're discussing. It's from Donk, level 80 Tauren Warrior from Fidelity Stag Helmet US, and he says this: Dear TB, I'm just going to go off a bit on hard modes. At first, they seem like a great idea. Ideally, they would provide a way for both casuals to experience the entirety of the content in the game, while providing more hardcore guilds with an opportunity to set themselves apart from the fodder, and reward them for their effort in the process. That was the idea. In actuality, however, the hardcore guilds are not being rewarded with anything other than seeing the hard modes nerfed repeatedly for casuals. Beyond this, the concept is flawed. Raiding the same content but with more HP and more damage output isn't really a reward. Sure, the loot improves, but if you're like me, you raid mostly to see new content. Doing the same content on steroids...
This was the mentality, I'm talking about the commenter, the guy that said the question. This is the mentality that created LFR. People raid to see the content. Lie. Wrong. People raid for the gear. Yeah, there's some people that raid to see the boss, but if you want to see the boss, you can pop out the YouTube video and see it. That's a blatant lie. People do it for the E-pin, for the cloud of killing the boss, and people do it for the gear. Most people, 90% of raiders. And some some losers do it for fun.
I suppose has some kind of novelty to it, but there is no real reward, in my opinion, other than the EPing of getting a few achievements. The great thing about the previous system, like Old Nax, was that if you were a great guild with great players, you were rewarded with seeing parts of the game that few people had access to. In my opinion, Blizzard have become increasingly soft and mincy on us since they started giving everyone high Warlord gear before the release of TBC. It's just been a slippery slope of homogenization since then. All content must be accessible, all tanks must have exactly the same
For
abilities, all
that
classes
think
must be equal in
this
1v1
is a new
PvP,
thing of complaining.
DKs. All players must be able to get achievements ad nauseum. Of course you whine and say, what about Algernon? He's like a new boss for only hardcore guilds. Exactly, he's one boss. While it's a step in the right direction, it's rather piss-poor immo. While I have enjoyed raiding Ulduar, and I feel there are many well-designed encounters which have been since nerfed to the point of hoggitude, there still remains a distinct lack of light at the end of the tunnel. Big fan of the show and the new intro. This is an interesting little thing, because I too actually think that hard modes haven't been taken as far as they should be, yeah? Hard modes. Some of them are really good and some of them aren't, yeah? Good hard modes, yeah? Good hard modes include the Freya and Sartheron hard modes, yeah? Those are good hard modes. They add, like, genuine new bits to the fight, yeah? Flame Leviathan, good hard modes. Yeah, not good hard modes. XT, Mimiron.
Okay, so he's commenting on the Ulduar hard modes. A lot of people, up to this day, how long? 12 years later, still say that Ulduar had the best difficulty system in the game. Basically, in Ulduar, this was the only raid, to my knowledge, except for maybe Sul'Gurub. It had that mechanic, but it was like way different. You could, every boss, every singular boss, you could choose how the difficulty of the boss. Nowadays, you get into the raid and you choose. It is heroic, it is mythic, it is normal, right? But back in Ulduar, you would get it in all the raids were normal difficulty. You would walk into Ulduar and you would, when you got to every boss, you could like turn on a lever or a crank or whatever, and you would make that boss to activate the hard mode for that boss or not. And they would reward different loot and stuff, but it was boss per boss basis. A lot of people like that system. I don't know if it was as well implemented as people like to believe it was, as it worked as good as it was. In my opinion, people got I don't want to say nostalgia goggles, because that's not it. I think people were blinded by the fact that Ulduar was a great raid, and that's what skewed their perception of how the systems in the raid were good. I don't think that was a huge difference to what we got today. You could make an argument that it's better, but the reason that people say all the time that they want the Ulduar system of hard modes is because of Ulduar being a good raid and having good memories of the raid, because it was legitimately good in or outside of the hard mode bosses. Okay, enough of a tangent, let's go.
The first hard mode. The first hard mode was in fact Hakar, yeah? Hakar had a bunch of abilities that you could disable by killing the bosses surrounding him. Now, there was no reason whatsoever to not kill those bosses, because obviously you want the loot, and you didn't get any extra benefit from not doing it. But what that would do is, doing so would disable certain abilities that he had. Now, hard modes, in my opinion, should always not just be extra damage and extra HP.
Okay, so just a little tangent on that. The thing about Sul'Gurub is that you saw it in Classic, is that some bosses, if you're in a guild setting, some bosses, they got pretty worthless loot, and people in an organized guild that is like has already all the loot already, they would do the hard modes in quotation mark of Hakar just to skip those bosses because they deem them unnecessary. That I don't remember the name of the runs that they would do, but that's like the only reason, to skip the bosses.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about done. It's time for shoutouts, folks. You got a couple of minutes to send in your shoutouts. TheMurloc@gmail.com. That is TheMurloc@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can tweet me at twitter.com.
You can see this is an old video, I'm not lying to you.
No, don't do that. That sounds filthy, doesn't it? Why is it that tweeting sounds so awful? I can't understand it. It just sounds terrible. Alternatively, send me a PM on IRC. You can do it.
IRC chat. Instead of a Twitch chat, this is so old. They would do the audio of the stream. They would stream the audio live, not videos, just audio live, like a radio. And then they had their IRC chat. I don't know if I'm gonna put some footage of an IRC chat in the edition, just so you guys can see what an IRC chat was. They had like their own separate chat for people to live chat during the show. Like that's like the granddaddy of Twitch chat. That's how they did it. And ironically, TotalBiscuit was so ahead of his time. They took him away too soon. He is like, I would have killed to see him live at that time. That would have been so impressive. We're talking, he started this show in 2008, I think. 2011. 2007. It must have been crazy.
On IRC.MMOIRC.com, #pound, WoW Radio. We've got a ton of people on the channel today. It's amazing what happens when Blizzard makes a silly mistake. Everyone comes and tunes into my show, and people say I should stop being so angry. Are you kidding me? Do you think I want to drive away half my listeners? A shout out to everyone that is whining on the forums about the emblem changes. Maybe if we're loud enough, Blizzard will cave into us. Yes, indeed. We must defeat the army of badgers. Yes, the badgers are in our way.
He calls badgers the casual, I don't want to say casual, like the players that instead of raiding, they got the ICC level gear from just running heroic dungeons and thinking they were the big deal just because they did some dungeons. That's what he's trying to roast, calling them badgers because badges.
An anti-shout out to Blizzard for failing on multiple levels. Dunkirk. Can I get a shout out to me? What's a no? Yes, you can. Well done. Pat on the head. Shout out to the new emblem changes. Yeah, they suck, Tilt. And if you like them, you do suck. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about Blizzard.
He's talking again about the badge system changes. For context.
It's justification. It's like two-line justification for this change. Its two-line justification for this change was it wanted to close the gear gap, right? Now, there are three kinds of raiders who would benefit from this change. The first kind is the new raider. The reason the new raider would benefit, well, obviously he gets access to gear quicker than he otherwise would. And the reason why this is a potentially positive idea is because at the moment there aren't that many guilds running through Naxxramas. And there aren't all that many pubbies indeed, running
outside of the dailies. People who used to do Nax just for the dailies after ICC came out. Like, it was the only reason to do it, for badges, ironically for badges.
Naxxramas. Not entirely surprising. I wouldn't want to run through Naxxramas. I would actually rather jump off a bridge at this point than run through Naxxramas ever again. The second kind of player is the undergeared raider. Now, the undergeared raider, we're talking about a guy who is undergeared through things which are not really his own fault. Like, for instance, an alt. Yeah, alts are generally undergeared. Also got players who, say, have recently returned to the game or taken a hiatus and therefore have lagged behind. Yep, there's another group of players. We've also got ones who had just had bad luck, or perhaps couldn't raid at the times that the other guilds on the server raided at, couldn't put it into their schedule. You know, who wanted to try and were willing to do the work, but were just unable to for whatever reason. Yeah, that's the second category. Now, the third category of people that benefit from this change, and I believe this is the majority, are the bad players. Yeah, these are the guys who actually...
These are the people that complain about the Chronos 4 timeline not being slow, because they think that making it 23 months long is gonna make them somehow get to Naxxramas. It has nothing to do with the video, that's it.
Actually can't get Conquest tier 8.5 and indeed tier 9 level gear because they're too terrible in order to do it. Now, these players, of course, should never ever be catered to in a million freaking years. And the reason these players should not be catered to in a million freaking years is a question of basic parenting. Yeah? Basic parenting, basic teaching method is that you do not positively reinforce bad behavior. Yeah? Ever.
Like
if you are terrible at the game, and Blizzard comes along and says, oh, little Timmy, it's okay, just wait a little bit and we'll give you all the epics you could ever possibly want. No, you don't have to do your homework like the rest of them.
Keep in mind what the language he said. Wait a little bit and you will get all the epics you want. That's my main problem with current WoW, and to a lesser extent even old WoW, is that why should you care about getting gear if Blizzard is gonna make it pointless in a few months with the new gear. Like, and the Classic had this problem, but not to that extent. You know, like a lot of gear from the Mountain Core was still useful in Nax. But nowadays, as soon as the new tier drops, all the gear from the previous tier, absolutely 100% of it, is now worthless. And like it breaks the illusion that you're not wasting your time playing this game. That's a good way to put it. Like, it makes it obvious that it is pointless to raid and to farm gear, because Blizzard is gonna make it pointless in a few months, arbitrarily, for no reason.
The children, it's okay, you get a gold star just for showing up. That's a terrible way to treat your player base. And yes, actually, a large proportion of the WoW player base are children, and a large proportion of the player base are man-children. Yep,
Most
people
of it.
who are just either socially inept or just plain not grown up. Yeah, they have a sense of entitlement that is magnified by the fact that they have anonymity and they're on the internet, and people's traits tend to get exaggerated on the internet. They become unfettered. Yeah. Now,
Anonymity.
I do not believe that in any way, shape, or form it is a good idea to reward bad players, because that's just stupid. Do I really have to explain to you? You guys are not idiots, right? I know some of you disagree with me on the badge issue, but you guys are not stupid, because if you were stupid, you wouldn't be listening to this show. We tend to deal with some relatively highbrow stuff here, I like to think. So, yeah, if you were stupid, you wouldn't be listening. So, I'm going to assume a basic level of intelligence from all of you. Which means that you understand the concept that rewarding bad players for doing bad things is bad. Yeah? That's bad reinforcement. You are reinforcing bad behavior, bad habits, bad playstyles. You don't want that, because that negatively affects your experience as a good player. Yeah?
Okay, that's a secondary argument, in my opinion. The reason you don't reward bad players for playing poorly is because they will never become good players. The reason a lot of the old players in WoW are good and the new players in WoW join the game, they are crap and they quit, is because they got no incentive, or no, I don't want to say incentive, they got no clear messaging sent to them that they suck and they need to improve. And whether you like it or not, whether you think this is mean, feeling bad when you lose is the only, not the only, but the strongest thing that drives you to learn and to try hard. If nobody ever loses, nobody ever has to try again. Like, why would you try to win if you cannot win? If nobody loses, nobody wins.
The more bad players there are in the game, the worse your experience is going to be, because invariably you're going to run into some of them and they're going to waste your time. Now,
keep in mind, this was exacerbated when he's trying to say that the more bad players are created, the worse your experience is, because you're exposed to those players. Because keep in mind, also in the ICC patch, I believe, they added the Dungeon Finder. So back in the day, or even today in Classic and TBC Classic, you wouldn't be exposed to bad players if you were like a hardcore raider, because you had your own group of people that you did your dungeons with, or at least you would have to talk to people and choose whether you wanted to play with them or not. But then the Dungeon Finder comes out and they jam you in a group with random players, and those players are from every skill level and you got no say on who is in that group. So the more bad players that exist, the worse groups you're gonna be in it on average. That's what he's trying to say.
let's assume for a second that Blizzard is actually doing what it says it's doing, i.e. they're trying to close the gear gap for players who have not had the opportunity to get the gear through, reasons that are not their fault. So we're looking at new players who can't get it in Axcruise because everyone's running Ulduar.
And also, to be fair again, the problem that Blizzard tried to solve with badges was an actual problem that they caused, but still an actual problem. Nax and Ulduar was dead the second that TOC came out, Trial of the Crusader, because Trial of the Crusader, it had 4 lockouts, and all those 4 lockouts were better or as good as the Ulduar epic, as the Ulduar hard mode epics. So or maybe not all of them, but most of them. Like you had to do 10 men normal and 25 men normal and 25 men heroic and 10 men heroic in TOC to get all the gear. Like almost none of the Ulduar gear. If in fact I think less than 3 items of the Ulduar gear were still useful in the TOC Trial of the Crusader tier. So what happened is that since all the loot from Ulduar and Naxxramas was now obsolete and useless, no pre-existing guilds ran Naxxramas anymore, and when that happened, the new players that didn't have any gear didn't have any chance to actually join a lower level raid to get their gear, so they would have enough gear to do TOC and ICC. You know what I mean? So that's that's what he's calling the gear gap, and it is an actual problem that needs a solution. And he obviously understands it, but he's talking about how the batch solution is the worst possible solution they could go for. And nowadays they just buff the loot of the dungeons, but it's like the same mentality that brought the system we got today. And Titan forcing that tank god is not anymore a tank, but that's also has to do with it.
And we are looking at ungeared play.
And the welfare epics, you know, the box you get every week. That's also like another catch-up mechanic. That's the equivalent of badges that we got today in retail.
Players, whether they be alts, whether they be people who've recently returned to the game, or whatever. Now, the way they're doing this, of course, for those who don't know, and if you do, then I'd like to know how much the rent of that rock you're living in actually costs you per month, is they're going to give conquest emblems to everybody. Basically, anyone that runs heroic content or upwards. And they're
also heroic dungeons in Rat were really easy.
Also going to give emblems of triumph, which is also a slap in the face, to people who do dungeon dailies. Yeah? Which is obscene and ridiculous and makes no freaking sense. Now, that's their quick fix. That's their way to close the gear gap. And it's lazy as hell. It is one of the laziest development decisions you can ever possibly imagine. And even if you support the badge change, you should at least chastise Blizzard for being lazy. Yeah? Not coming up with something a bit more innovative to deal with the problem of the gear gap. I mean, for God's sake, they've been creating raids for years. The gear gap has always existed. Always.
It always existed, but it got exacerbated in Rat because of the reasons I told you earlier. Like back in Classic or TBC, people still had reasons to go to Karasan, people still had reasons to... By the way, TBC had a badge system, but badges were supplementary to the gear. You couldn't get like a full set with badges, so you actually had to raid still to get it. Badges weren't like a huge thing. People like to say it was, that's not the case. The way it would work in vanilla was that people still run Molten Core because the Onslaught Belt or Sulfuras or the Thunder Fury was an item that people from all tiers, all levels, even people in Naxxramas still needed those items, so they would still run Molten Core for them. So if you were a fresh 60 player back in vanilla, you still had a reason to go, you still had raids for the Molten Core to join. That wasn't the case in Rat. You didn't have raids for Naxxramas to join. That's where the problem got exacerbated. The problem always existed, but it was never as bad as during Rat before the ICC patch.
And it's taken them this long to figure out how to fix it, and their fix is basically a band-aid? Yeah? I mean, for God's sake, you've got people with horrible virulent diseases out there.
People got no way to get the gear, so we're gonna just give them the gear. That's gonna fix everything.
Yeah? Here's the metaphor for you. You got people with a wide variety of horrible, virulent diseases. And what ends up happening as a result of these diseases is they can't raid, yeah? There's a lot of different diseases, a lot of different symptoms, but they all have the same end effect. And their way of fixing it is to slap on a band-aid and give you a lollipop. Or in this case, like 40 or 50 lollipops. Yeah? Even if your teeth are rotting, even if, for God's sake, you do not need sugar. You know, because it will send you into some kind of hyperactive mess. Yeah? There's the twisted, stretched metaphor for you. There's the analogy, as it were. Now, I have a solution. I don't believe Blizzard will implement it, but I have a solution. You know what? I like coming up with ideas. This show has always been about ideas. It's always been about presenting some alternatives, and some of them actually do get adopted, yeah? Sometimes this does get through to Blizzard. We know Blizzard listens to this show. It's not surprising. The show is one of the most popular WoW podcasts on the internet, and one of the longest running. It's not surprising that Blizzard would listen to it. I imagine they also listen to other podcasts as well, and that's cool. So, every now and again, we do see things that have come as a result of this show. Now, with the badge change, I feel so strongly about the badge change. And I would implore Blizzard to actually listen to what I've got to say on this one. Now, here's a solution. Yeah? What you are trying to do here is you are trying to help out new players and undergeared players, but also not help out bad players. The problem with the current badge system that you're going to implement is that it busts open the tiers and it causes a kind of a uniform effect. Yeah, you're giving it to everyone. Yeah, bad players included. Now, if you want to avoid giving good gear to bad players and yet close the gear gap at the same time, then this is what you got to do. Nobody wants to go back into Naxxramas, right? That's an established fact. Naxxramas sucks. So, there's been you must have seen all of the negative criticism of the way that you basically ruined Naxxramas. Yeah?
Basically, to make long story short, they made it too easy, nothing like the original version. They scrapped a bunch of mechanics.
I was one of the people that said Naxxramas is freaking terrible this time around, and of course, I was proven right. Some people said, oh, well, blah, 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 you're just elitist, blah, blah, blah. It'll be fine. And of course, it wasn't.
If I remember correctly, when Wrath of the Lich King came out, within 3 days, brand new content, by the way, so it's not comparable to classic TVC when they did the same thing. Brand new content. In 3 days of launch, people, a lot of guilds got to from 70 to 80. They did Naxxramas and the other raid that I don't remember the name, the 10-man raid. Like, all the content was already done by 3 days. And people were like, oh my god, like, how the hell are those guilds doing this? They are so good. And then, like a week from then, the pugs were clearing Nax, dude. Like, pugs were clearing the new content within a week of it launching. That's how bad Naxxramas was implemented.
They ran it for 2 weeks and then shut up. That's just the way of it. There's a shocker. Now, what you need to do is this. You have to make a distinction between the bad players and the new players, i.e. the new raiders, the recently 80, and the undergeared. Now, how you can do this is quite simple. You have to make a skill barrier. You have to segregate via skill and via the ability to listen and do your job
properly. Find a way to get them to a raid.
And what you also then have to do is make sure that there are other players who are willing to go back into Naxxramas. Yeah, because that's the problem right now. They're not...
Okay, that's what I'm telling about Classic having this problem kind of fixed. Thunder Fury was a really hard item to get, and all the guild wanted to help out the main tank to get it. So even if you were like a Nax guild, you still go to Molten Core to help your tank get the Thunder Fury, and since none of your guildies wanted to do Molten Core anymore, because, like, why would they? Like, they would pug other people to fill the raid. And that's how new players in late vanilla had a way to get into raids still.
Willing to go back into Naxxramas, so you're coercing them to go back into Naxxramas by giving them Elements of Conquest. Yet, Naxxramas still sucks, and indeed is going to suck more, because the players who are going back there are horrifically overgeared for it now. And it was already easy to begin with. Now it's even more so. That means...
And that also is post-nerf, because they nerfed Naxxramas after release 2. So they got more gear, the content is all figured out, and they nerfed the raid by that point.
It's a snore fest. It's a face roll. No one wants that. They want a raid that's fun. So here's what you do. You've got the brand new mechanic that you've put in called Heroic Mode, yeah? It's been changed around. You've now got 10 and 25 man raids. This is the new content that I'll be talking about later. And you've got heroic modes. Heroic modes are basically hard modes, yeah? But you set the entire instance to hard. Now, what you can do is you can do the same thing with Nax. You can introduce a heroic Nax. Now, what you can then do is take a look at the encounters and have a look and see what you had to change and what you dumbed down between Nax 1 and Nax 2. And then you revert those changes. For instance, those of you who have been in Old Nax will be aware that the Hygen dance, yeah, being hit by Hygen's goop or whatever it is, would kill you in one hit in Old Naxxramas. Now it doesn't. Yeah, that's why that fight is a snore fest. because you don't have to be awake. If you fail, it doesn't matter. Yeah, because you get another.
I get his point. I would say like they should have actually, like if they went to this route, like I don't exactly see what TV is saying. Like I would have rather have them make new mechanics to replace them rather than get the old mechanics copy pasted into it. But yes, he's trying to say that like, put mechanics that make it hard outside of numbers. That way, people that don't have a lot of gear still are still useful as long as they know how to do the mechanics. Because dead people do 0 DPS. Mechanics are everything.
Another shot. It just doesn't kill you. You know, someone just sticks a hot on you, you're back up to full in no time. So here's what you do. You make it deadly again. You make it kill. Yeah? Not only that, but let's go a step further. Make it kill and make it explode and kill other people within like 20 yards.
That way they are gonna kick out the bad players and because they cannot carry them. Like the whelps in Onyxia, you know?
Make it dangerous. Do the same thing with Thaddeus. Yep, get my Exner back up. For instance, my Exner is now a joke because of the new heals over time that have been introduced. Counteract that by making her hit harder and faster.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to say about that they shouldn't just exactly copy-paste it. Like, he's onto something, but they shouldn't exactly copy-paste the mechanics of the old encounter. They should, like, make new mechanics because by the Rat era, people had more abilities to respond to stuff. So, for example, say Patchwork in Naxxramas, to keep up with the example, Patchwork was a boss that had really strong DPS checks, but in TBC and by transition in Rat, people had heroism or bloodlust, so Patchwork, his DPS check mechanic would have been a little pointless because people have better cooldowns now, and so on and so forth. Like, for example, making skill shots that you gotta dodge is not as effective by the Rat era because a lot of classes, like for example Warlocks, got more mobility to deal with those.
During the web phase. Also, AoE has got more powerful, which means the spiders are AoE.
Not only AoE got more powerful, but lots of classes that didn't have AoE got AoE, for like Shadow Priest.
In one hit, and there's less of them. Change that.
Of course.
Make them harder.
Yes.
Make them hit faster. Make them more resistant to AoE. Make them have more hit points. And you can do this throughout the entire instance. You can buff any mechanic that would have, in the old instance, actually killed you. Yeah? Now, why am I saying that? You know, why am I just saying, oh, well, let's do this with Nax? Well, here's the reason. Because with that, you make a distinction between people who suck and people who are just undergeared.
And this is also like the thing, right? Because this is what maybe an intentional brilliance of Onyxia. You cannot outgear being an idiot on Onyxia or similar raids, by that matter. Because if you got like full tier 3 and you are an idiot, you're gonna wipe the raid because you're gonna pull all the whelps. Well, maybe if you already got tier 3 and you're a warrior, you can probably like tank all the whelps and not die, but still, you got my point. Dead people do 0 DPS.
Yeah, there's the distinction. There's the line that needs to be drawn. Undergeared players and bad players. Bad players are going to fail in this new Naxxramas, no matter how much gear they've got. Because all those mechanics that involve you actually being awake and playing your class properly, they're going to work against you. And they're going to be fatal. Now, the undergeared player, yeah, or the new player who is willing to listen and follow orders and is, you know, a good example of their class, is not going to die to these mechanics.
Also, like, I know people are going to tell me this, yeah, but man, I don't have like 70 hours to practice on the game. I cannot be one of those autismos that goes like with 300 APM, like dodging everything and stuff. If you can stand where you're told, you got a future in raiding. Yeah, you're not going to push Mythic, because Mythic is way harder than raids back in the day used to be and stuff, but Heroic and down, and by transition, Wrath of the Lich King raids and TBC raids and vanilla raids, if you can stand what you're told and dispel when you're told, or like very simple concepts, you got a future. You don't have to be a gladiator mechanically to do a raid properly. And that's what he's trying to say. Like He's not trying to be like an elitist that says, yeah, if you're not the top 1% of skill, you're not gonna succeed.
These mechanics have got nothing to do with the amount of DPS you can do, nothing with the healing,
Exactly.
yeah?
Nothing with
Utterly
the numbers.
unrelated to gear.
Dead people do zero
Completely
DPS.
and totally separate gear from skill, skill from gear. Separate the two. And what you've then got is a test of how well you can play. And it makes it more interesting for the players who have already done Nax to Death. Because the people who did Nax to Death were complaining it was too easy and you could snore your way through it. If you make it so you can't, people will go back in. Now, here's what you then do. Yeah? You give scaling rewards based on whether or not you have people in your group who have an average lower item level than everyone else. Yeah?
I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I would see like people finding a way to cheese it. But let's entertain it.
So that means it actually benefits you to take new players into the raid instance. Yeah? Take alts. Take new guys. Yeah? If you know a guy who's applied to your guild and they're like, oh, well, they're undergeared. Right, well, we'll take them anyway because their application looks good. They seem like a nice guy. They seem like they're going to be willing to pull their weight. They're going to be a good addition, but they're undergeared. Okay, we take him in. We take him to Nax because we benefit by taking that guy into Nax Ramas.
I mean, I see the mentality of it, and maybe if you, because let's be fair to TV here, he was like going on a rant on a radio. He wasn't like trying to design the game, okay? He was like, you are allowed to diss on Blizzard's ideas because they got like a year in advance to plan out a system. And he's like coming up with the first solution that comes to his mind. But maybe like there's a way to make such a system work and not be exploitable, because what I'm afraid would happen is that you get like 10 people that are really good and 10 random alts and like just to funnel gear to the top. It's called split raiding, and it already happened with personal loot. But now and again, like, to be fair to TV, I am saying this with the hindsight of knowing how it got exploited, a similar system. Not a similar system, but like how a similar exploit has already happened during the personal loot era. People would go in with lots of classes of the same armor type of alts that they didn't intend to actually get any gear from it and just trade it to the mains.
Yeah, now, the item level detection is already in the game. You can just see the Realm First Algernon 10-man achievement. That is based on item level. That mechanic is there. It's not difficult to implement.
And that is true because in Cataclysm they put it visible to everybody else in the UI.
And you throw in some extra gold, throw in some extra loot, throw in some different loot, throw in some cool non-combat pets, mounts, achievements, titles, all this extra stuff. Huh? And what you then do is you close the gear gap for undergeared and new raiders, and you get people to go back inside Nax Ramas for a reason, as opposed to, oh look, loads of conquest, and we're doing the same old boring instance.
But you still have to raid to get raid gear.
It shuts up the guys that, including me, that said Nax was too easy and it was basically ruined the old Nax Ramas, which is absolutely true. It did. Yeah, it sucks in comparison. You can fix that. It's relatively simple to do. You just get an upgraded heroic version Nax, which is on par with Ulduar vanilla difficulty. It gives more variety to existing raiders. It ensures that more people go back into Nax Ramas, so it means more new players can get groups. And it segregates, which is what you're now trying to do with the new Colosseum. Just bear that in mind. This is what you're trying to do. It segregates player skill levels. The bad players can't go in because they'll just ruin everything. Yeah? Does that sound like a reasonable idea to you? Because it does to me. Separate those three groups out. Benefit the first two. Benefit the undergeared. Benefit the new. And do not benefit the bad. Then I'll be happy. Yeah, that's a more elegant solution than your badge change. Your badge change is a quick fix. It's a band-aid. This is an immunization. This is a vaccine. This is a medicine, an antibiotic.
Yeah,
it's a magic bullet.
I like the analogy.
Whatever you want. Think about it. Just a little bit of theory craft there. Just a little bit of speculation. A few ideas. My name is TotalBiscuit, and you listen to Blue Please here on WoW Radio. When we come back, we'll be playing for you the Scourge Vent recordings, exclusive to WCRadio.com.
Oh, dude. This is quite something. For the sake of clarity, I was not around watching TotalBiscuit back in 2009, but I wanna show this precisely because of that. Okay, this video has 263 views, okay? Like, not a lot of people really know about this, and I wanna bring light to the matter. Like, all the criticisms that people got about retail, all the criticisms that are gonna be present again during RAT, to all those people that say that RAT was an expansion. This was from 2009, and TV already understood the core issues with the philosophies of Blizzard at that time. Lots of what he said, lots of what TV did, influenced modern content creators, like big content creators, in ways that some of them do not even understand. Welfare epics, that's his idea. This idea that people say nowadays that they are catering to the casuals, that has been around for a long time. Okay, it's not something new. This guy was so ahead of his time, dude. Like, you listen to what I said, the IRC chat. They had an IRC chat because Twitch wasn't even a thing when he was doing a podcast. Podcasts were not even called podcasts back then. He was called the radio show because a podcast was not something that people knew about. This is how old school, how ahead of his time he was. It's truly a shame that we lost him so early. I would die, I would kill to see what he would have to say about Classic, especially the TBC mount. He would have made it so freaking funny, because that might be a video to react to in a later date. Like what he said during Cataclysm about the mounts and the cash shop. That was so rich, dude. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I hope to see you again. And this guy, Seshgar Archetypes, who he uploaded like almost all the episodes of his old show. Give this guy some love. By the way, let's type it, Warcraft Radio. Also, this is the radio. Let me change scenes for a minute. This is the site where he would do all this stuff. Like, if you really want to check it out, their archive is not very good, but here is what he would do, like all his shows. So if you want to check it out to see how it was like and whatnot, it's warcraftradio.com. There's a lot of his old stuff still left here, but again, like the archive they got is not that good. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day. TotalBiscuit, you will not be forgotten.